What you're going to want to do is experiment with different types of poetic forms. Try writing poems in the forms that you'll learn now. See which ones help you write the most freely and the most creatively. You might, for example, like forms that have very strict rules, such as sonnets or haikus, or you might prefer more free-flowing poems, such as lyrics or free verse. You'll find, however, that some forms are better suited to some topics than others. Study the different poems mentioned in this program. Using models is a very good way to help you learn to write poetry and to unleash your own creative potential. So let's discuss some of those forms. One form is the ballad. The ballad is a story that is told in a song form. Ballads often tell stories about adventure and love. They have a very strong rhyme. It's often A, B, C, B, and they have refrains, repeated words or phrases. You may know some ballads that are very popular songs. You might have heard the same refrain over and over again. Harry Chapin used to write these kinds of ballads, for example. In poetry, Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Keats's La Belle Dame Saint Merci are examples of famous ballads. Concrete poetry is another poetic form. Those poems are shaped. They can be shaped like a soda bottle, they can be shaped as a heart, they can be shaped as anything at all. A very famous example is George Herbert's Easter Wings, which literally are shaped like wings. And in those poems, you pick words not only for their sound and their emotion, but also how they fit the pattern that you want to create on the page. Another form you can do is a dramatic monologue. In that poetic form, you're creating a fictional character and you're telling a story about that character caught in a critical moment. What makes it a monologue, though, is the character himself or herself is doing the speaking. One of the most famous ones in English is Robert Browning's dramatic monologue, My Last Duchess. The entire poem is told by the Duke. The Duke has eliminated his last Duchess. We never really find out how he eliminated her. We suspect that he killed her, but we don't really know. And he reveals his cruelty to an emissary who has come to arrange his next marriage. And we learn from what the Duke says that he's a cold and cruel man. Another famous one is T.S. Eliot's Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. In that dramatic monologue, J. Alfred Prufrock is telling a story about a critical moment in his life. Another poetic form you might want to explore is an elegy. An elegy is a very solemn poem that deals with death. Famous examples are Walt Whitman's When Lilacs Last in the Dooryard Bloomed. That's an elegy about the death of Abraham Lincoln. Another one is Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. An epic is another form. It's a very long, serious poem about a hero and his heroic accomplishments. Usually it's set in the past, and the past is very heroic and very, very exciting. Homer's Iliad is an example that you might have read. Milton's Paradise Lost is another one. Now, free verse is a poetic form that has no fixed meter, no fixed beat, no iambic pentameter, and it's usually unrhymed as well. Walt Whitman is probably the most famous free verse writer in America. His Song of Myself is in free verse. Here's a little bit of it. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. Well, you can see the lines aren't the same length, they have no set beat, and they don't have any rhyme. Haiku is a Japanese verse form that has a syllable pattern. The first and the third lines have 5 syllables each. The second line has 7 syllables. Many haiku describe images from nature. Here's one. Winter's brisk winds cut through the bones of naked trees. Do their teeth chatter? 5, 7, 5. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and write a haiku. How about write one about a butterfly that looks like a flower? The butterfly ends up on a branch. Then come back. Here's one by a very famous Japanese poet. The falling flower I saw drift back to the branch was a butterfly. A lyric is a very brief musical poem that expresses the speaker's feelings. That's the key to a lyric. It has emotion. An example is Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, or Robert Burns, you probably heard Auld Lang Syne. It's been set to music. A narrative poem, like any narrative, is a story. It has a plot, it has characters, it has themes. For example, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, or Dante's Divine Comedy. Now, we've done some of the poetic forms that you can write. Let's take a look at some of the elements that you can use in your poems. One of the most important ones, especially for traditional poets, is rhyme. Rhyme is the repeated use of identical or nearly identical sounds, not letters, but sounds. Poets use rhyme to create musical sounds, meaning, structure, and unity. There are two kinds of rhyme. There's end rhyme and there's internal rhyme. End rhyme occurs at the end of lines. Internal rhyme occurs within words, a poem within a line. You're probably more familiar with end rhyme. Sonnets are 14-line poems written in iambic pentameter. So now I'm pulling all of this together. Now we've got a form, we've got a structure, we've got a meter, and you'll discover we have a rhyme. There are two main kinds of sonnet, the Italian and the English. The Italian sonnet is normally called a Petrarchan because Petrarch was the person who wrote many of them. In this particular 14-line poem, the first 8 lines, called the octave, rhyme A-B-B-A, A-B-B-A, and give the subject or the conflict. The final 6 lines, called the sestet, rhyme C-D-E, C-D-E, and resolve the problem. In the English, called the Shakespearean sonnet, because Shakespeare wrote many of them, has a different rhyme. It's A-B-A-B, C-D, C-D, E-F, E-F, G-G. That G-G, the final couplet, normally presents a little bit of a twist or resolves it. So now what I would like you to do is to identify the rhyme scheme in Shakespeare's Sonnet 130. Then come back. Now, rather than read you this entire poem, I'm just going to read you the words that rhyme. Sun and done, so I'm going to put A's there. Red and head, I'm going to put B's there. White and delight, well, that's a different rhyme, that gets a C. Cheeks and reeks, that gets D's. Know and go gets E's. Sound and ground gets F's. And rare compares gets G's. You know it's a Shakespearean sonnet, so you know it's an English sonnet. And it fits exactly that rhyme scheme. A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So now what I would like you to do is to pause the program and write a Shakespearean sonnet on love. Then come back. Now, I don't expect you to write a real Shakespearean sonnet, but I provided one so you can see a model. This is one of Shakespeare's famous love sonnets. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Now, Shakespeare's language is obviously a little bit different from our language. We don't use words anymore like thou. You might have wanted to use some of this diction to capture a specific mood, or you might not have. But nonetheless, what you've succeeded in doing is creating a love poem in a 14-line format. A poet works with specific literary techniques, such as rhyme. Here are some of the ones that I think you're going to find most useful to unlock your creativity. Alliteration is the repetition of initial consonant sounds in several words in a line of poetry. Initial means first. Consonants are all the letters that are not vowels, and it occurs within a line, sometimes within two lines. For example, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. All of our tongue twisters are alliteration. Writers use alliteration to create musical sounds, to link related ideas, to stress certain words, and to mimic specific sounds. Here's another example, not a tongue twister, about the lilting house and happy as the grass was green. House and happy, grass and green. In your study guide, you'll find an exercise about alliteration. Your job is to fill in the blanks with the correct word from the list in order to create phrases that are alliterative. When you're done, come back. Here are the answers to this exercise. French fries, they both start with F. As good as gold, the G's. Baby, boomer, the B's. Pretty in pink, two P's. Sink or swim, the S's are alliterative. Sweet, 16 S's. Big, Ben, the B's. Final, frontier, the F's. And the green grass of summer, the G's. In addition, we have an allusion. Now, I'm saying it that way, allusion, so you don't confuse it with illusion. An allusion is a reference to a well-known place, person, event, work of art, or other work of literature. An illusion is an optical mistake. It's like a mirage. So don't confuse the two, because they're not at all similar. Allusions enrich a story or poem by suggesting powerful and exciting comparisons. In your study guide, you'll find an exercise about allusion. Your job is to fill in the blanks with the correct word from the list in order to create phrases that contain allusions. When you're done, come back.